Good morning and welcome to Frank's School, 24th day of the 7th year, first video. I'm describing Resurrection. I'm actually working on this, seeing if I can get this movie done, Resurrection. And yesterday I talked about the soundtrack. This isn't exactly the soundtrack now, but rather the idea of the order of build came up. How do you go about constructing, at least how should I go about constructing such a thing? How do you actually make it happen? You know, so many people, when they write a book or a story, I think, just start at the beginning and write it through. And as they write, they see where that leads them. That would not work. That in the past, that has not worked for me. Many years ago, I wrote an epic poem called The Eve of Christmas. And I planned in advance, and I've discussed this elsewhere in the course, I planned in advance that it would have 42 stanzas because I based it on John Keats' Eve of St. Agnes. And so before I wrote any stanza, I knew what needed to happen in each stanza. Later, not too much later, I had my students, I was substituting, I had my students write an epic poem, epic quote-unquote poem, the Song of Marion. Marion actually is one of the principal characters in this. Marion, he doesn't go away. And I divided it into 4 cantos. And once again, I mean, since I was working with students, I probably had 30 students, maybe more, write it. They had to know what had to happen in the stanza that they were going to write, how the one before it had ended, and how the one after, and give information about how it was going to end. So they knew how it was going to begin, how it was going to end, sort of, and then they wrote it. To make that happen was really hard, the logistics of it. Well, anyway, I realize I'm confronted by that again. Oh, here's one thing. I said to Astrid, I think I'm using the name Electra. Tom and his supporting partner, sort of, is, I think I'm going to use the name Electra. But the names don't matter because this movie is wordless. People would not know the names of the characters. In the credits at the end, I don't even know if the characters' names would come up there. You know, I guess you've got to have words if you're going to give credit. You've got to name you've got to name names of the people who did stuff. But do you have to say what part they had? I don't know. But by that point, maybe it would be okay to just let words come in. I don't know. Another thing I wanted to say, you know, the casting and the screenplay, the casting for me is easy to describe what these characters are like. And I'm going to do that soon. I don't know if I'll do that tomorrow, but I may do that in the next video, or at least start it, to describe these 9 named characters. Not named in the movie, but named if you want to discuss it. The screenplay, boy, that's going to be the real work. And this friend of mine, Casey, former student of mine, Casey, has convinced me that a screenplay is necessary. And you know, that'll be quite a job. So how do you go about doing it? Oh, and another thing, it occurred to me that I could actually make a playlist, or even maybe, I suppose, a movie, and call it The Making of Resurrection. Whether the movie actually was ever made or not. You know, a lot of times there'll be some movie and then there'll be a documentary, the making of that movie. Well, in a sense, that's what I've been doing now. 29 videos in that playlist from 3 years ago, and now I'm at it again. All right, now, the order of build. Well, there's 5 acts. I just chose that, not arbitrarily, because Shakespearean plays usually have 5 acts. You know, I figure it's time tested. Why don't I go with that? So there's 5 acts. I started that way. What's going to happen in each act? But before that, I had decided that there should be an overture. And that I've got pretty clearly in my mind. What that will do is show the village that is to be resurrected at its worst. I mean, almost, you might as well say dead, in need of resurrection. And that's one of the reasons I want that music, Christ lag in todesbanen. Christ lay in death's strong bands. Well, the village lays in death's strong bands. But even before that, the title. I think the movie has to have a name. I don't see there's any way around it. The name, for now anyway, is Resurrection, and that should go on the screen. So I suppose the whole thing could start with that title, and I've worked on that. The overture I have in mind. Now I'd say about 5 minutes. These are just estimates. How long would the whole thing be? Well, 2 hours is pushing it for most movies, I think. But if it had an intermission or an entr'acte, I originally thought an hour and a half. I don't know, but let's just work with the idea of about 2 hours. That would be 120 minutes. And another thing, the credits at the end, if they probably don't even need to be counted because people would be getting up and leaving by that time in a theater. 5 minutes for that, and that they sort of take care of themselves. I'm tempted to erase them actually. So what am I left with? 5. If each act was 20 minutes long, that would be 100 minutes. 5 for the overture, 5 for the coda, that's 110. I don't know, 10-minute intermission. I'm just really roughing this up. And the coda, well, let me just go through what has to happen in these 20 minutes. And it comes down to how many shots. How many shots would there be? And what would those shots do? Now, I'm using language that I'm unfamiliar with. I've seen many, many movies. And I understand that movies are put together by shots and there's transitions. I don't understand this language. Casey does, the man who at the moment is helping me some. So how many shots will there be? What has to be accomplished within those shots? It's going to be a tall order, I think, but in any case. So if I've got 20 minutes for Act 1, I, in a sense, have done the screenplay for Act 1. I've probably said that already. What happens is a team is assembled. 7 characters arrive. There is tension. I mean, there is conflict within that, but it's conflict against the elements. The way it stands now, there's a storm, and they are really in distress by the end of it. These characters, but they are assembled. And another thing that should start as soon as possible is the character of Festus, who in some ways becomes the most interesting. I don't want to say the main character, but in some ways he's the main character, even though you might not know it. And one of the tensions that drives this is his seeming lust or sexual desire for 2 of the other characters. Bryn, gorgeous, blonde, thin woman, and Anna. Now, in my mind, she's got dark hair, gorgeous woman. Now, what he doesn't know is that Bryn has a mate elsewhere already, and what he doesn't know about Anna is that she's a lesbian, and she has a mate as well. They are not available to him, but he doesn't really know that, and so that tension, because he is a very virile, sad, angry, lonely man, and so that could be introduced. I earlier argued that you really have to have certain conflicts to drive a story. In Act 2, the work begins of resurrecting the village. Each one of these characters has a domain, and they can work together. They have their themes. And so the blending of these themes as they work together, as the work is being done, as they cooperate to some extent. There's one point where Anna leads Festus off into the woods, and takes him by the hand and leads him off into the woods to and I said, whoa, but it's to show him something. But all of them, that she's found up in a water supply is what it amounts to. She's associated with water. So there's an awful lot to be done there. And the music, the themes can be blended as well as they work together. As seen, the Act 3, they go to the fair. Something has to be dealt with to make the idea that, I don't want to say money exactly, but survival, kilocalories, I should maybe say, that it's possible for them to actually get an income so that this isn't just a dream world. How do they feed themselves? how they clothe themselves, and they go to the fair, and the work also within Act 3 has to become overwhelming. As the seasons develop, that happens basically. A lot of gardeners probably know that there comes a point about in June where June is busting out all over. Well, it comes on so strong that you just can't keep up with it anymore. The weeding, if you will, or the harvesting, the work becomes just overwhelming for this team. In Act 4, apprentices arrive and rescue the day. This is a little bit like, what do they call it, Deus Ex Machina or something like that. They arrive and they rescue the day. And many, many extras at this point would be enter the movie. Act 4 and approaching the climax of the movie will be I said a beer fest, because wine, you've got to have years. Wine I just don't think would work. But why I say that is because Haydn, in The Seasons, in Autumn of the Seasons, that's where the music would come from, and it's for a dance. It's wonderful music. I'm calling it a beer fest and a dance. So pretty much there is the climax as they celebrate the fact that they have accomplished this. They have resurrected the village. 20 minutes for that. See, this is a tall order. Act 5, this is, they call it denouement in the structure of a plot, a falling action. There possibly a review of what you saw in the overture, of all these things that have been redeemed and made new and made fresh. That could be at the end of this, but probably in Act 5. And then the characters depart. Most of them. Well, some of them. No, not some of them. Probably the only ones that actually depart are the old man, and we find out it's his daughter. Marion is the old guy that was sitting there at the beginning, and Bryn is the woman who walks up to him. They leave. They have things to do elsewhere. So there is the departure, and then right about the point where the moviegoers feel that the movie is over, that was fun, then comes the coda, and Festus's character is resolved. All this sadness, this anger, this lust that has not been understood, very possibly the movie viewers would not like him or fear him or maybe feel sorry for him. This big part. Well, I'll tell you outright. What happens is his wife and 2 children, who he thought were dead. He thought he'd lost them forever. They were gone. They appear. Now, how they appear, I don't think has to be explained. But that's the true. It's not exactly the climax of the movie, but it's the coda. It's the kicker, kind of at the end, and then the credits run. All right, so I'm constructing this kind of from the top down and breaking it apart into, well, this has got to happen. All right, Casey, I hope you're watching this. I'll go, I'll continue to go to work on this. Bye for now.